My name's Chris McCormack. I'm a full-time employee of the British Heart Foundation. So thank you very much for inviting us today, and pass my thanks on to Carla. I hope she's enjoying her holiday. So I'm not a doctor, I'm not a clinician of any kind, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a researcher, I'm not a scientist, but I am a patient. So I am a patient of many years in terms of experience in heart conditions myself. So what I'm about to go through with you is something that I've kind of lived myself. So I do know it from the inside, but not necessarily from a clinical point of view. And I understand you guys are probably predominantly scientists or researchers or in that space anyway. So I will try and answer any questions that you may have. If it's highly technical, I probably won't be able to answer it. But if it's stuff that's in the kind of common ground as far as the BHF is concerned, then we can have a good go. All right. Please make it interactive, because it's going to be awfully boring if I just stand here and talk for an hour. So if you've got any questions about this space, if you've got any history in your families with regards to heart conditions, then please fire away. Carol did ask me to specifically talk about heart health with regards to women. So that's what the presentation is steered towards, but we can kind of take it anywhere that you wish over the next hour or so. At the end of this particular section with regards to heart health for women, I do have a little bit to share with you about the use of a CPR app that we've just developed, that we've given you access to as a consequence of this meeting, so you can all become lifesavers, hopefully. So let's kick off. There will be a quiz, by the way, halfway through this, so if you wish to make notes, then please do. It's just a fun quiz. There's only half a dozen questions, but and I can help you with the answers if you wish. And I will try and emphasise the answers as I go through, so that's your kind of pick up as we go along. So we've been around 60 years. I guess most of you know the British Heart Foundation. We've got one of the best known brands in the third sector, but not everybody understands what exactly we do. So my role in the BHF is that of a community and corporate partnership manager for Oxford and Wiltshire. So that all sounds very grand, yeah, but what does it actually mean? Well, essentially it means that I work with everybody from individuals all the way through to CEOs in terms of raising awareness and also raising much needed funds, because ostensibly what the BHF does is we raise funds and we then give those funds to the research community who do research into life-saving diagnostics, cures, whatever. And we give them an awful lot of money. We raise somewhere, on a good year it's probably around 130, 140 million. On a bad year, as in the COVID years, the 2 years that followed COVID, then it went to under 100 million. And we had to pin back some of the projects that we signed. We actually lost an awful lot of funding during those 2 years, and it's taken some time to get that back, but we're actually doing that through more engagement with corporates than we had before, and a lot of people doing gestures around wills and in memoriams, and also people like yourselves, corporates where there's 30, 40, 50 people working in an organisation, and all of a sudden they decide they want to run around the building half a dozen times and raise 10 quid or whatever it ends up being. But that's 10 quid that we didn't have this morning or yesterday morning or tomorrow morning or whatever. So no matter what the amount is, it all goes to the same place. It goes into research and it goes into scientific projects. So you may well have seen we changed tack around Christmas time. And so a lot of our advertising now is pretty hard hitting. We make no apologies for that, because if someone does have a cardiac arrest or a heart attack, then it's not an easy sight. And one of the things that we'll learn through this morning is that the recognition of the differences between the two and what you can do to help people. So, as I say, we've been around 60 years. There's an awful lot of things happened in those 60 years, all the way from thinking about, helping out with regards to transplants that became prevalent in the early 60s, through the development of pacemakers and the technologies to be able to go into the heart through arteries. I myself have been a recipient of 2 ablations, which is an operation on the heart that stops you having a open heart surgery. So they go in through using cannulas through the arteries and effectively repair the heart from outside, if you see what I mean, without having to do open heart surgery. In the mid-60s, around 1965, that was when defib technology first started to get acknowledged. And a defib then was probably about as big as that table, as opposed to now it's a relatively, you can get them as small as that Tupperware section there. And again, we'll talk a little bit about defibs and how you recognise them, where you can find them, and how to use them as we go forward. But just a bit of history, and as I say, some of the things that the BHF has been responsible for with regards to our research, all the way from clinical trials to these days. We're very, very lucky in Oxfordshire. I don't know if you guys know, you may well be involved in some way, shape or form with what goes on at the John Radcliffe Hospital and some of the research institutes that are based here. We've just given £30 million to 2 professors, one from John Radcliffe and one from Harvard University, who are doing research into finding a cure for heart failure. Now, I guess as scientists and researchers yourself, it's very rare that you guys actually talk about a cure. You will talk about trying to find a cure, but you won't be very specific. These guys have been very specific and said, their aim is to find a cure within the next 10 years. And that's particularly pertinent to me because following a heart attack 2 years ago and a pacemaker 3 years ago, then that's what I've been diagnosed with, is having heart failure. And essentially what that means is it's not as tragic as it sounds. It's a condition which is survivable and manageable, but ultimately it's a condition for which there is no cure at the minute. And it essentially means that the heart stops pumping as efficiently as it should. So if you see me yawning, it's not because I'm bored, it's because I get tired relatively easily, which is why I've parked just across the way.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
So, a site like this, should we have a defibrillator on site?
Yeah.
Does anybody know if we've got one? No, I haven't. But I've got to go and sign a new contract in a minute, so I'm going to ask those questions, because actually, it's one thing we should all know.
You should.
If there is one, and if there isn't one, I'm going to push the landlady to get one.
Yeah.
If it's at the gatehouse, we should know to ring and get it here.
Yeah. One of the things that we talk about is the magic 10 minutes. So, and I'll go through this in detail later, but if someone's had a cardiac arrest, and I'll talk about that as well, then you've got 10 minutes really, because that person has literally stopped breathing, their heart has stopped. So it's different to a heart attack. And the only way that person can survive is if somebody takes over manually, making their heart beat before it can be restarted. And so knowing where a defib is essential, I think, for any employee. So where is it? How do you access it? Because it's all well and good knowing where it is, but if it's in a cabinet with a lock on it, how do you get the access to the lock? Who's the keeper of it? Is it well maintained? Are you going to be able to use it when you find it? So all of those are relevant questions for you guys going forward. As I say, we find answers through science. The adverts that we put out in the new year were all around turning science fiction into reality. And we put out some fairly hard-hitting advertisements at that time that showed people, collapsing from a cardiac arrest and what the effect of that is on the people around them, and also, on their wider family and friends. And to do that, we do it through 49 clinical trials. We've got a number of clinical trials. We've got a number of centres around the UK that focus on those clinical trials, and we've got a number of fellows and PhD students. We're looking, as I said, so as well as that project for looking into stem cell research that's been given to the John Radcliffe, we also have the Institute of Regenerative Medicine based here in Oxfordshire as well. So I'm very lucky to be able to take people to those areas and let them experience a little bit of what the BHF is doing, because one thing large corporates always ask me is, where does the money go, Chris? So if I'm asking for 25, 30, 50,000 a year from a corporate organisation, it's good to be able to take them and show them what we do. So, quick question for you. If you're experiencing symptoms, chest pain, pressure, restriction in your chest, sweating, pain in one or both arms, nausea, fatigue, what would you do? And this is where the first difference comes between men and women. Now, as blokes, we'll probably go into a corner in a little huddle, shout everybody that we know, ring 999, and make a great big fuss. Now, I am kind of generalising a lot here. Whereas the female species, are a lot stronger, guys. I know you might not want to admit it, but they're a lot stronger. And generally, the research that we've gathered over the last 10 to 15 years shows that this is where the issues start in terms of the recognition and determination between male and female. Because generally, a female will crack on. It's not really anything. I've given birth. This is not pain. I'll carry on. But it's the worst thing you can do, especially if you begin to recognise the symptoms like that. So the correct answer is, of course, you would ring 999. Unlike what my wife did when I had a heart attack, she rang 111. So we've gone through a nice chat after that, I can tell you. How do I play a video?
Well, it's just, I would have thought it would be the other way around. That men would just get on with it, and women might try to run out. Because men, can be a bit stubborn and like, I'm just going to ignore it and just...
It's quite the reverse.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the middle person.
Did it have sound?
I don't know. There should be some sound from the video. So basically what this is showing you is what happens in this case in a heart attack. So this is showing you a blockage in an artery.
Oh, sorry. I'm not sure I should be watching the video. Yours in the world.
Don't walk you through it. I can talk you through it. We can go on to the next. Okay, so this is essentially a summary of it anyway. So the main difference between a heart attack and a cardiac arrest, does anybody know for a start, or does anybody want to have a stab at that in terms of is there a difference, or do you think they're the same?
Well, I would say they're the same.
Okay.
Exactly the same thing.
Anything else? Anybody else? Or even a stroke or a simple faint or whatever. I don't know if I'm wandering in and out of shot here, so I'll stay here. I like to wander around the room, so this is a bit restrictive for me. I'm to stare around the camera. Okay, cool.
The stroke is a movement of blood clot from somewhere else into your heart, I would say.
A stroke is a restriction of blood to your brain, okay, and can result in somebody collapsing. But what we're talking about today is the heart. So a cardiac arrest and a heart attack are two very different things. Now, one can lead to the other, but a cardiac arrest is when somebody falls over like a ton of bricks, their heart stops. A bit like, any of you that were unfortunate enough to see the Christian Eriksen event during the Euros. If you analyse the video of him actually collapsing, it is literally that. He does collapse like a pack of cards, like a ton of bricks. And that's because the heart stops, so everything stops functioning, you fall over, and if you was to approach someone that had a cardiac arrest, then you won't see their chest moving. One of the things that you're always taught in first aid is maybe hold a piece of glass or a mirror to someone's mouth, see if they're actually breathing, or hold your ear to someone's mouth to see if they're actually breathing. So they'll have collapsed, their eyes will have kind of rolled away, and they won't be breathing as a recognition factor. That's because their heart has physically stopped. Now, someone that's had a heart attack, totally different. They will have been experiencing some of the symptoms that we talked about earlier. but they'll also still be breathing. They're likely as not to potentially still be alive unless it's a massive heart attack, which will have caused a cardiac arrest and they will have departed. But if it's and I know this sounds twee, but if it's a mild heart attack, then you'll still be conscious, yeah? You'll be feeling uncomfortable, your chest will be feeling very, very tight, as if someone sat on you. You may be sweating, but you will be conscious, you will be breathing. So that's the major difference. Now, if someone's had a heart attack, the thing to do, call 999, get the ambulance to them as soon as possible, make them comfortable, but they are going to live. Highly likely they are going to live. However, someone that's had an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, any guesses, guys, what the survival rate is for out of 10 for people that have an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest?
1 in 10.
1 in 10. It is 1 in 10, which is a frightening statistic. And that's one of the reasons why the BHF is on this mission to create lifesavers around the country, by giving people awareness and knowledge of what to do in that situation. So we will do that today. And this explains the difference. So cardiac arrest is an electrical problem, so probably something to do with your natural pacemaker. So mine has always been electrical, so I'm wired slightly incorrectly, which my family and my wife would probably echo, and certainly my mum and dad would probably echo. But I had my first kind of arrhythmia incident when I was in my 30s. I used to play county level squash, so my heart rate was relatively low, so my heart rate went from 65 to 220, and it stayed there for far too long. So I was rushing into hospital, bang, 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 and they find out what it is, and they're able. I was actually born with too many natural pathways in terms of this signal here that supplies the trigger to your heart. And they identified where those additional pathways were, and they go in there intravenously and they take them out. Okay, which was pretty amazing to me in 1991 to be lying there and seeing all this. I was working for Hewlett-Packard at the time, massively into technology myself, and to see all this happening to me whilst still being awake, in inverted commas, was just incredible. So cardiac arrest, electrical problem, someone will collapse, pack of cards. Heart attack is totally different. So this is where the blood supply to your heart is impacted in some way, shape or form. So as you guys all know, I'm sure, your heart is made up of a number of chambers, and those chambers are fed by valves and arteries and stuff. And it's when one of those arteries supplying, in my case, it was the tiniest little artery right in the centre of the heart that had got blocked, which caused mine, which is why it was only a mild one. And I was able to walk back home. I was walking the dog, felt really, really weird, just weird. Was a little bit warm, and then just felt as if someone was actually grabbing me like this. I recognised it instantly because I've got a background in maritime safety as well as my corporate work that I've done over the years, and just kind of sat myself down. I wasn't very far from home. I just gently walked back home, and then my wife rang the 111. So let's just summarise. Cardiac arrest is what? And what happens?
Heart stops, you go down.
Okay, and heart attack is? Blockage of the artery. Okay, cool. We're good. So again, to start to emphasise some of the things that happen to women and some of the challenges we've got as a charity is, if I told you this statistic, you probably won't believe me. I certainly didn't believe it when I first heard it, is that heart and circulatory disease kills more women than every type of cancer out there. And that's, again, it's a frightening statistic, and it comes down to not necessarily recognising the symptoms. And I think for women, and I say this because, you know, some people in my family have gone through this, you're given a lot of information about breast cancer and what to do and how to find it and what to do if you do find it. But how much information are you given about heart and circulatory disease? Probably next to nothing. Probably this is the first time that you've heard it explained in detail. And that's why every 15 minutes someone is admitted into hospital as a female. Once they are admitted, unfortunately, research has shown over the years, this is not necessarily the case now because of what the BHF has been doing, but over the years, 10 to 12 years, then 50% of women have been incorrectly diagnosed when they have had a heart attack, purely because of, maybe the symptoms that have been described, or doctors thinking that they had something else wrong with them, which was more generically female than male. So, I wanted to share this one with you in terms of some of the differences in potential symptoms. So really the ladies amongst you probably need to think about those lower ones, because the top ones are very much the same. But these here are very specific to women that have had a heart attack. So maybe just make a note of them and just be aware of them, either as females or those of you who've got female partners, then just be aware of it. Because one thing that I've made sure my family have gone through now, in case anything happens to me, is I've given them some awareness. I've given them some, they've done some formal training in terms of what to do if anything happens going forward. So this is just the same as you were saying earlier, sir, finding out where your defib is. Well, this is, as far as I'm concerned, it should be common knowledge for everybody in the workplace. Yeah?
Can I ask why is it in women that it's upper back pain and it's obviously underlying, so it's obviously different? Why?
I think that's a technical question I can't answer because I'm not a clinician. I can only make you aware of what the kind of research and background has said. By all means, if next time you go and have a review with your GP or
I just
whatever,
wondered because it's
very specific
and it's
yeah.
very specific,
Yeah.
so I wondered
Yeah.
why.
I don't know the reasons, but I'll see if I can find out and I'll go back to Carol and Crystal. So any questions so far, guys? Please throw them in. Anything online? Anybody still there? Wave. Can't see you waving, but one of the things that happens when you go into hospital after you've had a heart attack, one of the diagnostics is an angiogram. And again, research has shown that a number of females don't get access to that angiogram, or the angiogram comes back as being negative. So what the BHF has done is we've come up with a very specific test now that's been used over the last 3 years to try and reduce that figure, that previous figure, down. And because of that standard of care and because of those changes in the test sequencing, it was found that what they were looking for in an angiogram in a male wasn't tough enough, or the test that they were making, I think it's for something called tropelion. Does that ring a bell to any of you guys? Yeah. So the test that they were looking for with regards to the amount of that weren't robust enough in females. So they were coming back and saying that they were okay when in fact they weren't. And so down to BHF research, that's now changed, and females do have a different test than males when they go in and have that. I've talked about that one before, which is just frightening, really. You might want to remember this one. So out of the amount of funds that we raise, then 8 to 10%, depending on the year, goes into very specific female-orientated research. So every penny that we get, we're very lucky as an organisation. So it only takes 19 pence in the pound to run the BHF, which is incredible when you think about the size of the organisation with 3,000 people We manage, 100 to 150 million pounds worth of income every year, but we give 81 pence in the pound back to research to actually try and change the world as far as heart condition is concerned. This is something that happened to a doctor, and she herself, even as a doctor, didn't believe that she was having a heart attack, and even when she got to hospital and they diagnosed her as having a heart attack, she still didn't believe it, because of the way that, I don't know, maybe females are brought up as a different way. I don't fully understand it myself, but again, I can only tell you what the research says. And in her particular case, she had gone through that situation I've just talked about in terms of having that propylene test and it not recognising what was actually wrong with her. So, any questions thus far?
Can you speak to one of the research projects? So you mentioned 8 to 9% go to women-specific research. Is there any
So there is one of the conditions. Just have to remind myself what it's called. I think it's called SCAD. Yeah. So SCAD is a spontaneous coronary artery dissection, and it's something which is more prevalent in women. And there's been a lot of research done into that, and something that my own wife I actually had when she was pregnant was preeclampsia. So again, you probably recognise that, or those whose partners have been pregnant, and they think that preeclampsia puts a lot of pressure on the heart, and so those are two of the largest projects where we've been funding female-specific research over the last 5 years.